The greatest banking heist in humanity is about to take place and has to do with your bank account, cash, and this upcoming scheduled cyber event. Let's talk about this. All right, so I want to take a quick minute, share my thoughts. So I'm trying to connect the dots and just put together a picture as to what could be. And so now that the FOMC is done, we were told ahead of time, all the news syndicates were basically telling us that they were going to taper this and do 3 hikes and stuff like that. So it's nothing of surprise whatsoever to me, and I'm sure to you as well. But one thing that stood out the most out of everything that took place in the Q&A session happened to be this.
I would say, cyber risk, the risk of a successful cyber attack is, for me, always the most, one that we would be very difficult to deal with. I think we know how to deal with bad loans and things like that. I think more a cyber attack that were to take down a major financial institution or financial market utility would be a really significant financial stability risk that we haven't actually faced yet. So I could go on with a list of horribles, but I think that's a decent picture of where I would start.
So right there, Jerome Powell was talking about what concerns him. And it was basically 2 things. One before that was the variant. And then the second one, which really stood out to me, was the idea of some foreseen, unplanned cyber event. But then also, this is the first time that I recall him giving such detail as to what concerns him. But then again, we all knew about this well in advance because we've heard this from somebody else.
We all know, but still pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
So now I believe the narrative is set. How exactly this will play out, we'll find out. But in the middle of all this, it happens to be your bank account and cash. Cash posing the greatest threat to being able to preserve some of your economic and financial well-being and actual physical property in the form of cash. So within the last couple of days, I came across a picture that I thought I would touch on because I've seen a couple of these pictures now. It happens to be in reference to cash, where it says, due to the Federal Reserve suspension of new currency ordering, we currently have no new money to distribute. We apologize for the inconvenience. And so I saw that picture and I thought about, wow, why is there such a narrative surrounding cash nowadays? And then I thought, what better way to try to pull off an actual heist by basically locking people out of their accounts as well as restricting their access to cash, all disguised as some type of cyber event, because the warning signs are all around us. So this picture here I grabbed off Twitter, and then when you did a little research into it, it gives you some insight as to where this come from. So when you go to the Federal Reserve Services.org website here, it gives you a little information as to what that's all about. But then again, there's always more to the story than what we're being told. And of course, whenever something is started, usually it's never rolled back. And in a minute, I'm going to touch on what's even more alarming. So here it says here, 2021 holiday currency ordering periods are suspended. So this was an article from October 15th, but it says here, the Federal Reserve will again suspend the holiday currency ordering periods in 2021 to proactively reduce operational strain on the cash supply chain during the winter holiday season, as ongoing risks associated with the pandemic continue to create unprecedented challenges. So can someone please explain to me what in the world is cash supply chain has to do with unprecedented challenges at a time when most people don't have enough funds to meet their needs, and that's why more people are resorting to using credit. But to move on first, there is no coincidence that along with this so-called cash supply issue that they're concerned with around this holiday season, with more people withdrawing cash for giving as gifts or whatever, it's going to continue on into 2022, I believe, just because if you look around within your area, somewhere around you, there's been more small retail banks closing than we all could have imagined. And of course, this is not by coincidence, because this is a part of the agenda, I believe, to slowly but surely cut off the access from people being able to get their funds when they need it most. And it happens to be before that next scheduled event. And so it's losing its purchasing power. It's still your last line of defense to be able to protect and preserve your time and energy in the form of something tangible that's still used relatively on a day-to-day basis. Even though cash But well before now, there was an issue dealing with cash and your ability to go get it. And it happened to be 2020 in March 26, when the Federal Reserve suspended reserve requirements for all banks in regards to how much cash they needed to have on hand. So well before this cash squeeze that the Federal Reserve talking about needing to do for the holiday seasons, they made it advantageous for the banks 2 years ago now to no longer have to require cash. And what I'm referring to, here's an article right here from last year. It says Federal Reserve eliminates reserve requirements. What exactly does this mean? It says the Federal Reserve announced they were reducing the reserve requirement ratio to 0% across all deposit tiers as of March 26, 2020. What is the reserve requirement? It says the Federal Reserve's Regulation D has been around for years and requires depository institutions to keep enough cash reserves available to meet the immediate withdrawal requests of their net transaction accounts. It says why the reserve requirement is so important. It says the Federal Reserve's requirement is essential for the stability of our economy as well as the financial security of individuals, families, businesses, and financial institutions. It says requiring banks to have a reserve requirement service to protect them and their customers from bank runs. It says what does this change mean? Depository institutions that were required to maintain deposits in a reserve bank account to satisfy reserve requirements will no longer be required to do so and can use the additional liquidity to lend to individuals and businesses. So right there and there, well before this current cash squeeze that the Fed is putting out there, the banks themselves were no longer actually required to keep cash. And why was that? Because as a part of this ongoing liquidity situation, any excess reserves that was kept at the banks are now allowed to be sent back to the Federal Reserve. And there we have that reverse repo situation to the tune of 1.6 trillion or so per day of depositors' funds no longer needing to be parked actually within the bank, but is now on loan at the Federal Reserve itself. So this is a part of the plan from the very beginning. Get your funds out of your hands. Make sure you don't have access to them. Limit your ability to get cash when needed, all while using the great excuse of some type of cyber event. So the very framework has been set from the very beginning as to what is coming. So far we've had two events. We've had the Cyber Polygon event that took place this past summer, and then just last week or two we had an event include 10 nations with the IMF and things like that as well. So it's two events and two spokesmen for the global agenda, i.e. Claus as well as Jerome Powell, talking about their concerns for the greatest threat to humanity being some type of cyber event. We have the foundations for what will be the greatest bank heist of the century. And it's all geared upon the next pre-scheduled event, which I believe possibly could be coming in the very near future, i.e. 2022, 2023. And it's going to be geared around the fact that now that the FOMC has laid out the framework as to what they're going to try to do, they're going to try to dial back on some of the easing while tapering at the same time. They're fighting that inflation narrative. At the same time, the world is in need of dollars just because all the dollar-denominated debt out there that can't be serviced. It's all going to come to a head in the form of a clash. And what they're going to say is that we were on our way to recovery. Everything was moving fine. We baked in 3 hikes and all that good stuff like that. The world was fine. The variant was whatever under control. But then again, some event happened. And guess who they're going to blame it on? The same exact people who yesterday announced that they're going to be moving away from the current financial infrastructure, i.e. Russia and China. So basically we have the perfect setup for what could be the event of the century, i.e. no withdrawal from your account. And actually when you look on the screens, there may not be anything there. So what does all this mean? If you put all these pieces of the puzzle together, you see that there's something brewing. Now it's just a matter of when. We've been given more than enough signs to believe that something is brewing. What do you do about it? Hopefully you are, and in my personal opinion, doing as much as you can to minimize the losses that you could experience, i.e. by having your entire financial future in the hands of people heeding these warnings, i.e. the banks, which are being groomed for this digital transition, because you better believe that once the system goes down, people can't get access to the funds. There'll be limits on how much you can withdraw, if there's even any cash available at the ATMs and banks. That puts the world in a very dire situation to where it'll be easier for them to roll out the solution. The solution will be, we need to come up with the CBDC, the digital dollar, the EUSD will be needed to supply the citizens with their currency, just because Russia or China or those bad actors decided to take down, one of the too big to fail banks. And therefore, there you have the introduction of the EUSD, which will be rolled out, or some collaboration with the stablecoin system or whatever. But anyway, wanted to just put all this before you, give you something to think about, connect the dots so that we can get the bigger picture as to what's going on. But yesterday with the FOMC meeting, to me, that was the beginning of the end of this current banking paradigm. So now that you know, hopefully you do something to prepare yourself for the days ahead. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Where did I miss it? What could I have added in? Feel free to let me know in the comment section. And the most important thing that you can do after watching this, if you're still here, take this video and share it so other people can put the pieces of the puzzle together for themselves. Question me if you want. I don't mind. The evidence is right there. Do what you must with it, but definitely let other people know about what's really going on. Thanks.